In today's lecture, we will be talking about globalization and protectionism. In popular media and also in today's politics, you must be hearing a lot about anti trade, anti globalization rhetoric. Now, the question is this: what's the impact of globalization? And it is a very debated subject. So, first, I would like to warn that I will not be able to cover everything in one lecture. However, I try to give you some gist the way economists think. Now, globalization can have other kind of impacts which are non-economic in nature. So, in this particular lecture, I will be focusing on the economic aspects of globalization and issues related to that. Before even going there, first let's try to define protectionism. What does this mean? It means when government legislates policies to reduce or block imports. So basically what government is trying to do, they're trying to close down the country from foreign influence or foreign economic influence. Now why they do it? They do it to shield domestic producers and domestic workers from foreign competition. We all know that often maybe there are some efficient firms or companies outside the borders of this country. They might come down and try to sell products at a much cheaper rate that can affect the domestic industry. As a result, often protectionism is a way to protect domestic industries, or in other words, to promote domestic industries. So, what are the different forms of protectionism? There are three main forms. One is tariffs. These are taxes that government impose on imported goods and services. So, idea here is that to make imported goods more expensive, so that consumers don't like to buy those things. So, as a result, the country will import less. Then there are import quotas, which means that you put a numerical limitations on the quantity of products being imported. So it's a more physical limitations on the amount of imports to a country of a particular good. Finally, there are non-tariff barriers. These are the ways a nation can draw up rules, regulations, inspections, and paperwork to make it more costly or difficult to import products. Examples: rules requiring safety standards or origin regulations. So basically, like for example, US has a lot of safety standards to ensure that goods that coming to the United States are of particular or certain level or quality, or it meets certain domestic laws which are regulations which is drawn by the United States. So these are non-tariff barriers which can be tweaked around to protect or to shield country from imports. Now the question is this: does protectionism really helps? And that's a $1 million question, and there's no easy answer to that, because what I'm going to show you, the effects are mixed. So as I said, the simple answer whether the protection helps or not, it depends. It helps protected industries, no doubt, because they are shielded from competition and lower prices. So if your industries are protected, that means that you are not facing competition from abroad. So you basically can live with what you are doing. And as a result, workers in the protected industries are also protected because they can keep their jobs because their industries are not going away. However, consumers are negatively affected because they ends up paying higher prices. Now when you have protection, that means you can have a situation where inefficient industries are surviving. As a result, consumers may end up paying higher prices. It also hurts industries which buy inputs from these protected industries. Great example, let's say iPhones, right? We can produce iPhones in the United States, but are you willing to pay twice or thrice the actual price of iPhone? Because we all know if we produce iPhone in the United States, it's going to cost way more than the price it cost us to import from China. Finally, protectionism is an indirect subsidy from consumers to producers, because no matter if in the end of the day, if you are a consumer, you have to pay higher prices, and when you pay higher prices, who is profiting is the producers or businesses. As a result, often it is said that protectionism helps producers at the cost of the consumers. But mind you, as a consumer, you are also a worker. There's a good chance that you are earning your income by working. And if you're working in a protected industry, which means that you can protect, your job is also protected. So it's a very complicated issue. So there's no easy answer on whether protectionism helps or not. Next, I would like to talk about does protection and protect domestic jobs, because that's another big issue. Or to put it differently, does less trade protects domestic jobs? Again, the answer is this: yes, protectionism can save jobs in a specific industry being protected, but it costs jobs in other unprotected industries. Why? If consumers are paying higher prices to protect industry, they have less money to spend on other industries. So jobs are lost in those industries, right? So basically, like if I have to pay more, that means I pay less to other industries. As a result, people working in those industries are suffering. Also, if a firm sells a protected product to other firms, so that other firms must now pay a higher price for a key input, then those firms will lose sales to foreign producers, and often lost sales equal to lost jobs. Let's take the case of the current tariffs on steel and aluminium, which is heavily touted by the current administration. Now, the fact is that steel and aluminum is used in a lot of other industries. And industries like car, industries like soft drinks, industries like machineries, which were buying imported steel, now have to pay higher prices to buy the same product from domestic producers. And what's the impact of that? Impact of that increased cost of production, which means lesser profit for these industries, which needs to buy steel from domestic industries, which essentially means that they will be selling less. As a result, a lot of jobs will be lost in these other industries which are not protected. Another topic that often comes up: does trade hurt wages? Because trade raises the amount that an economy can produce by letting firms and workers play to their competitive advantage, trade will cause the average level of wages in an economy to rise. Now, trade is seen as a technological improvement. Now, we learned earlier if there's an improvement in technology, which means that productivity increases. And typically, productivity increases, average wages increases. It's true that average wages will go up. However, average doesn't talk about the distribution of wages. And here's a major concern with globalization. While globalization may be benefiting high skilled, high wage workers, it may impose costs on low skilled, low wage US workers. And that's a real concern. Think about our assembly lines where people lost jobs because of outsourcing of manufacturing from US to other parts of this world. And obviously, the people who are working in assembly lines were not high skilled, super rich people. They are typically low skilled, low educated people. As a result, they are the sufferers of all these globalization policies. On the other hand, if you are in the world of finance or if you are working as a financier, obviously your companies have made a lot of money through this globalization process. So it's a real concern about the distribution of the benefits of globalization. Yes, globalization brings overall increase in benefits, but that doesn't mean that those benefits are equally distributed. Often those benefits are going to very few handful of people who are the beneficiaries of all this globalization process. Also, another question is asked: does trade hurt labor standards and working conditions? No doubt that in many low income countries, labor under conditions that would be illegal for workers in the US. So, labor often work in conditions which is simply we never heard of, like child labor. Often, labor are paid way less than US minimum wage, and also often labor in these developing countries have working conditions that may be extremely unpleasant or unsafe. Now, these are legitimate concerns, and often all these developing countries where we are outsourcing our manufacturing are often have a very low labor standard. And no doubt that those diminished labor standards affects our competitiveness, because in US if somebody is working, we have to pay a minimum wage, and we also have to protect our, through our regulations, our labor regulations, our workers enjoy much more right than perhaps rights in many developing countries. However, here's the interesting point. Most of this concern over labor standards or foreign labor standards do not affect most of US trade. Why? Because most of US trade is intra-industry, which essentially means that we are basically carrying out trade within the particular industry. For example, we import both car and also we export cars. So in the end of the day, it's intra-industry trade. And also many of the trade that we carry out with high income countries which also have similar labor standards as ours. So this whole idea that whether trade can hurt our labor standards is kind of moot because of the nature of the trade that we are carrying out. Because most of our trade happens with most of the OECD countries like the European Union, Canada, or many of Australia and many other developed countries. Finally, I'd like to mention another point that United States is not a world leader in government laws to protect employees. US is one of those few countries where we have some of the least protection among the developed countries. Even we don't have a federally mandated paid leave for paternity or maternity. This claim that our labor standards are being hurt, well, we have much lower labor standards than perhaps many other developed countries. Having said that, the issue of globalization is a broad issue, and what policies does work is an even broader. But in the end of the day, we have to recognize that benefits of globalization is not going to everybody equally. There are losers, there are people who are losing their jobs, and in the end of the day, we need to figure out as a society how to compensate for their losses.